Hello everyone, welcome to another Making Monday Lovable video. And today I'd like to share with you a little bit about the process of creation when it comes to my scientific illustrations. And it is because I was asked that recently by a couple of people, how I generally go about it, how I create these scientific visuals. And the first step to it is having somebody approach me that they need something. So usually, like almost 100% of the time, people come to me and ask me for help. They approach me either via LinkedIn or an email, either because they have heard of me from someone, or they've seen my webpage, it comes through my webpage, it's very different. But they come to me, they approach me. I'm not the person that's reaching out to people, asking them, do you want to have a scientific illustration? Do you need one? I found out in my life that that's the best way for me, how I work, how to say energetically. It maybe sounds passive, like I'm sitting there and waiting for people to approach me, but it's not, because I'm actively sharing what I do, especially here on LinkedIn, which is my main social media platform. So I share with people what I do with the world, and if they see me, they recognize it as valuable and like, oh, that's something I would need, then they have, can take the time they need to process, to think about it, what exactly they want, how, and then approach me. So most of the time when they come to me, there is already a set intention of getting a scientific illustration. And for that, I need to show myself and what I do so people know and can come and approach me. And then we set up a meeting, we speak. It could be digital, because it's possible to be anywhere in the world basically for the scientific illustrations, because they are all digital files. And we set up a meeting, or via Zoom, or we meet in person. Most of the time it is when somebody's located here in the north of Sweden in Umeå, then it's possible. Then I always also want to meet in person, because it's a nice feeling. And then we basically discuss. So the second part of it is, for the creation to occur, is for me to know what needs to be created. So we speak about the science. What exactly is it that you want to be visualized? Why? So where do you want to use this illustration? Who is your audience? Is it a scientific article? Is it a grant proposal? Is it a pitch deck? Is it whatever it is? These are information that I need to know to be able to create a proper and appropriate visual as well. Who is the target audience? It's important to know how specific can we get? How complex or how easy and easy digestible should the science be? So all of these things need to be discussed in an initial meeting. And then practicalities, like deadline, budget, deliverable steps, basically. So all these things we discuss in an initial meeting. And I often am able to give a rough estimate of the time and the pricing already by that time. Because sometimes it's just one illustration, sometimes it's several, depending on the style. It will take longer or fewer time, depending on whether it's a company or it's a research at the university. That also takes different amounts of times. So all these things, even though they might not directly be in the creation process of illustrating, they are super important for it to know what I am supposed to create and how. And when we've settled, when we agreed upon everything, we also come up with a timeline and so on and so forth. And I tell my clients that I constantly keep them updated with the progress. And usually the first thing that I create, sometimes already even in the meeting, in the initial meeting, because I wrote down notes and I scribble down sketches and ideas. If I get a description, I scribble it down visually, and then sometimes I share it on the screen if that's what they meant. So the first step the first visual that I create is a sketch. It could be pen and paper, or it could be a digital sketch. And I always share it with my clients. And creating a proper sketch based on the meeting is super duper important. And sometimes the sketch needs reworkings, sometimes one reworking, sometimes 3 or 4, depending on what it is. But I take my time to really make sure that this step of a sketch and a proper outline, a layout of the files or of the slides of the presentation, or of the different models and figures for the paper, that they are as good as possible, as detailed as possible, and have everything inside that's needed. Because if I make sure that creating the sketch is, as perfect as it could get, I avoid further revision rounds further down the line. Because there will be revision rounds, always tweaks of color, of layout, this and that, and trying different things. But the concept should stand. So it's super important to have a proper sketch, or sketches, depending on how many illustrations. And then it's a back and forth between the clients and sending it until it's approved. Then the next step. The next step is to actually do the first version of the illustration. If it is a vector file, I use Adobe Illustrator, and I have, my hardwares as well. I have a graphic tablet. So I come up with the first version of the illustration. And sometimes it's also several alterations, let's say several different setups, layouts, different framings, different color schemes. It could be any kind of thing that along the way, because I know what needs to be shown, I can play around with how to show it the best. And so then my client gets several versions, and then they give feedback. Okay, I like that one more, most of this, or can we combine this and that? And then I can, revise and redo. So that's for vector illustrations. When it comes to raster or pixel-based illustrations, I use my iPad for that. And then oftentimes my clients want a little bit more sketchy looking or cartoony looking look, to have it, easier accessible for people, and with a little bit more of a flowy impression or feeling. And then it looks hand-drawn, like a vector illustration looks very rigid and shapes and patterns. But when I use my iPad and the iPen and like a pencil brush, for example, which is digital, and I can just basically use the same flowy workflow how I create like a pen and paper drawing, like on a physical piece of paper. This is how it looks. And then I usually send first in line work. So everything we discussed, I deliver the scaffold, the skeleton of just the lines, and to see, okay, is that okay? And if that's okay and approved, I then add the colors. So there's still an option of tweaking things before I deliver the final illustration. So this is basically how I create my scientific illustrations. And there's so many different options, but this workflow is roughly the same for all of them, with tweaks here and there depending on what it should be, how it should look, and the client as well, and what they want. So I hope that helped, and in the end, they get all the files they need, and that's that, and they can use the illustration for anything, not just the one only purpose that they came to me for, but they can use it not only in publications but presentations, wherever. Just spread it, throw it out into the world, basically. So yeah, that's about the process of creating my scientific illustration. I hope that helped. If you have any more questions about that, feel free to ask me. Other than that, I wish you a great Monday and a nice week ahead. Talk to you next week. Bye bye.